as you may already know or you may not know, that Patchstack recently conducted a bug bounty where they analyzed more than 1,000 plugins to see what security threats and what loopholes do they have. And they came up with a very interesting report. And to discuss that, we have with us Oliver Sild. You might know Oliver Sild from Patchstack, from different WordCamps and events. I mean, Oliver has been a huge contributor towards the WordPress 4. He and his team has been contributing towards WordPress and WordPress security over the past so many years. And I'm so excited to have Oliver. Oliver, how do you feel? How are you? And if you can just give a short introduction about yourself to our audience.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. Yeah, I'm Oliver. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Patchstack. So
Mhm.
indeed, we've been working on WordPress security since a very long time. I think over 10, like I personally, over 10 years already. So what we do at Patchstack is we provide vulnerability management and mitigation. So if we look into security vulnerabilities in the WordPress ecosystem,
Mhm.
more than half of them are essentially disclosed and kind of published by Patchstack. So that's something that we really focus on.
Awesome. Along with Oliver, we have Myk Palmowski. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. So we have Maciek with us today in a panel discussion. So let me just give a brief introduction of Maciek. So Maciek has been with Patchstack along with Oliver. He's a web security enthusiast. He's a seasoned web developer, and he has been working, with Oliver and Patchstack over the past few years to make sure that we have a safer, online environment. So Maciek, thank you so much for being here. We are so
I'm
excited to
glad to
have
be here.
be here to present this, to have this panel discussion with us. Maciek, would you like to give a short introduction about yourself? I may have missed something, but if you'd like to add anything to it.
So yeah, for most of my career, I was a developer, but at some point I decided to switch to more people-related roles like
Okay.
DevRel, community management. So this is my role right now. I'm a security community manager at Patchstack. So I'm managing our lovely group of researchers that we have,
Yeah.
and it's fun. It's really fun.
I'm sure it is, Maciek. I think Patchstack is an amazing team. I have a few friends who work at Patchstack as well, and they have really nice things to say about you folks. So let's move on with the first question of this panel discussion. So you conducted this bug bounty, and it seems like a lot of work. I mean, I'm sure it had a lot of man hours go into this, a lot of money invested into this. So, what was your motivation behind conducting this bug bounty? I mean, what came to your mind is when you thought that, okay, so this is something that we have to do, and what was the motivation behind targeting WordPress plugins and at that magnitude, at that scale? I mean, Oliver, if you'd like to start us off.
I think actually it would be even better if Maciek starts with that because he was very much involved with setting this whole thing up, and I think it would be better if it comes directly from the source.
Okay,
Sure.
so in short, we run bug bounty every month. We just have a usual event that is quite simple. Researchers try to find vulnerabilities inside of WordPress themes, plugins, or core. They gain experience points, and at the end of the month, based on the leaderboard, they earn money. It's as simple as that. But once a while, we run some special events. And back in October, because October is cybersecurity month, together with Darius, we decided, it would be really cool to clean up the repository a bit. So we changed our bug bounty rules for that month, and we allowed smaller and older plugins to take part in it. In short, because if I remember correctly, back then, a plugin had to have 1,000 installs and be updated in the last 3 years. And let's remember, WordPress is 25 years old already. So there is a lot of plugins that are much older and still weren't used on more than 1,000 sites. So we changed those rules, and that's how it started, and it ended up with 1,500 something valid reports. So it was huge, and as you mentioned, it was a lot of work hours. Our triage team, well, how to put it mildly, they were tired. They were very tired at the end of the month.
I think maybe a good addition to add here is that if you compare, like before we created the Patchstack Alliance program, which is the ethical hackers kind of like open bug bounty program around WordPress ecosystem. So in 2022, the total number of security vulnerabilities found in the WordPress ecosystem was 500 in the entire year. So now we are during this program inside of like a single month, we did 3 times the volume of an entire year of 2020. So, the internal processes that our triage team has and like the whole setup of how we kind of can even validate that many vulnerabilities, it's like incredible. So,
yeah.
Awesome. That's awesome work. I mean, again, I would like to appreciate and acknowledge the fact that a lot of work and time and money has been gone into making sure that you analyze these plugins and you find bugs and you address this issue to the larger audience. And what does that would lead me to my next question? I mean, what does that tell us about the overall security of the WordPress landscape? You talk about you share that you conduct this activity every month, you find loopholes every month. I mean, you turn out reports every month. So what does that tell you? Like, is WordPress really safe for people? Like, is the landscape really safe for users nowadays, or should people think about something else?
yeah, I mean, funny thing is that I just gave a talk at work, in CloudFest like 1 hour ago on stage here in person. I'm on the call right now from the hotel here. But when we look into 2024, for example, the total number of security vulnerabilities found in the WordPress ecosystem was almost 8,000. So 8,000 vulnerabilities published in a single year. That's a quite crazy number, right? But what we need to think about is that these vulnerabilities have existed in the WordPress ecosystem for years, for many years. It's not that these are new vulnerabilities that are now being introduced into the ecosystem. These are vulnerabilities that have been sitting there, being available to hackers to just take over websites. So what we have started to do at Patchstack is just to kind of put a lot more attention into okay, we need to find those vulnerabilities before the hackers can, and make sure that these are getting properly patched, that they're getting, correctly disclosed. We coordinate the CVEs for them and all these kind of things. But something to maybe keep in mind of is 33% of all those vulnerabilities never received a patch. So if you're a developer and you're thinking that my websites are secure, I'm just gonna keep my website updated and things like that, then this is today not realistic security measure anymore. First of all, hackers are taking vulnerabilities, they are exploiting vulnerabilities in a matter of hours. So if a vulnerability is being disclosed at 2 a.m. in the morning, you're most likely not waking up 4 a.m. to start patching things up. And in 33% of the cases, you don't even have an update. So I think the security measures need to really change in terms of if we want to have an effective protection against WordPress. And maybe something I could add here additionally for what we see kind of happening already and what I see happening when we go into 2025 is the AI, and specifically it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because what we see is that WordPress as an ecosystem has always been a platform where a little bit less technical people can set up very functional websites. So now in the past, they've been using plugins for that, where they can just choose whatever plugin, install, click install, and go forward with their life. And all they care about is whether it's visually functional, right? Now, additionally to plugins, they have AI, which basically does the same thing, where they kind of ask the AI to, hey, can you create me this functionality? And then if it visually looks functional, they just deploy it. And we already see people generating plugins and uploading those plugins to WordPress.org, which are completely AI generated, and they are just riddled with vulnerabilities. So we are now seeing this situation where those AI generated plugins don't have any supervision of whether they are secure or not, because the people that created those plugins, they don't necessarily have the technical knowledge to look into that. And then there's this second half, or the other end of the sword, is where AI can also be very effectively used to find new vulnerabilities. We have an internal tool that we've built over a year already, which we are like slowly kind of making it public information, but we are soon releasing this as a new product, which already finds security vulnerabilities in the plugins automatically. So we need to take into account that this is not only Patchstack that has capabilities such as this, but over time, hackers will have tools like that as well, which will make finding vulnerabilities a lot easier, but also exploiting them even quicker. So that's kind of like the direction where I see, plus compliance, but I think this is a separate topic on its own.
Yeah. Maciek, anything that you would like to add to Oliver's response?
No, I'm really happy that Oliver mentioned about the AI, because even now we can see on social media there is one guy getting viral because he was nicely called vibe coded an application, and suddenly everyone is hacking it from like every way, and it was a paid application. So this is even like level higher, right? And he was very surprised that this is happening, because it turns out that people really trust AI. And for me, it's quite scary that we kind of learn to trust AI that quickly, without thinking about potential consequences, or the fact that AI still can't think about everything. I mean, how it was nicely put once, that AI is garbage in, garbage out. So if someone doesn't know a lot about programming, about some consequences, the prompt he will create will be probably correct in terms of functionality, but there won't be any security measures there, because the person don't have a clue about this. So without asking AI with the proper prompt and asking it to add those security measures, because it would probably help a bit, or at least it would be a great starting point. We will be flooded with a lot of code like this, and I think that next year we might have even more vulnerabilities than we had this year.
It's only going to get more vulnerabilities, and more insecure for users out there. That's what the data tells us, right? And before I move on to the next question, I just want to jump into the comments. I think there are a few questions from our audience over here for you guys. So I will start off with Ralph, who has a question that what's the process to evaluate a plugin for security and stability? I think the answer to this will be a bit longer, but if you can just briefly share what the process looks like when you are evaluating a plugin for security and stability.
I mean, for anyone to evaluate the plugin for the security and stability, I would look into their security processes. Like, do they have a vulnerability disclosure program? And that goes down into the compliance bit, because we have a Cyber Resilience Act regulation in the EU, which is like a GDPR for software security. So if you're using a plugin, you have to look into whether they have a vulnerability disclosure program in place. If they don't, then it kind of like tells already that probably other things security related are not getting attention either. So that's, I think, one of the kind of like the easiest way, I think, at this point to kind of look into it.
I would start with the vulnerability database. For example, we have one, WordPress and WP Scan has them too, and kind of checking the plugin that you want to install. There you will find this plugin history of vulnerabilities and status of those vulnerabilities. So if you will see that the plugin had vulnerabilities, but all of them were fixed quickly, it's a good sign, because it's normal that we make mistakes, but it's very important on how they handle the problem. If they fixed the problem very swiftly, they were open about it, it's a great sign. But if you will see in the history that there were vulnerabilities, but you will cross-check the changelog and there won't be any word about this, that's a huge red flag, because it means that they are hiding some things. So there are a lot of those small little things you have to take into account. But in general, as Oliver mentioned, if this plugin has some security-related processes, it's already a great sign. And together with connecting it with plugin history, it should give quite a good opinion about if it's a good solution, at least in terms of security.
Awesome. My next question is about, like, you talk about plugins and how plugins have these security vulnerabilities, loopholes. Apart from plugins, I mean, where do you see the biggest security gaps in WordPress? I mean, is it the core? Is it the hosting environments, like the third-party integrations that many users opt for? Apart from plugins, where do you see users getting, security threats coming from?
Well, if we look into our data set, then it's like 99.9% of the vulnerabilities are coming from plugins and themes.
Plugins, yeah.
Out of the 7,000, what is it, like 7,966 vulnerabilities, I think it was last year, 7 of them were from WordPress core, and none of those in the WordPress core were actually critical vulnerabilities that were ever exploited. So it's 100% about plugins and like everything that you are kind of like installing on top of this. Honestly, WordPress, like this discussion about like, okay, like you need like to keep your WordPress website secure, you need to use a secure hosting company. I think this is like, this is something that is like 10 years old, kind of like a recommendation where hosting companies have like a really bad configurations. Everything was in a shared environment, and like config files were like publicly available and things like that, where we're not in this world anymore, right? Like web hosting infrastructure is pretty secure. But what is not secure is the way how people are actually building and putting together those applications that they are hosting in those environments. If we look into like how websites are getting hacked, there's 3 main core reasons. One is essentially everything related to the kind of like cyber hygiene of that user who has access to the WordPress admin panel, and that's where they have like just like a very poor password policy where they use weak passwords, usernames. Maybe their username and password is stolen because they are cross-using it on multiple websites, and some website got hacked. And there's also like session hijacking where the devices, like we see malware that is essentially faking browser updates and asking you to install like fake widgets, and then it will steal all the session cookies from your browser. And then, this is another way of getting in. So it also boils down a lot into like, what is your, how do you actually take care of your everyday kind of like a security posture, right? And then there is the second half really of why all the WordPress websites are getting hacked are plugin vulnerabilities. So, to solve WordPress security, basically what you need to have is, make sure that nobody's getting access to your admin panel because of your, bad password and, username and like your stolen sessions and whatnot. And the second half is literally just vulnerabilities. That is the kind of like the 2 main avenues where most of the attention should go.
All right, Maciek, anything like you would like to add?
I remember then during one WordCamp that I was, I think in Wrocław, there was one guy who did an experiment. He prepared a server with WordPress that was kind of open for hacking. He wanted to check what will be the approaches of how the hacking will happen. And he observed the logs, and he saw like the first phase was, and it was really matter of minutes since the website was up. So the thing that Oliver mentioned before about how quickly those vulnerabilities can be used. So first phase was kind of detecting what is happening on this website. What CMS is it Laravel? Is it WordPress? Okay, it's WordPress. Great. So they started with a brute force attack. So having a weak password can be a huge problem. I mean, like not using 2-factor authentication right now, well, it's like asking yourself for having some additional problems. And so in his case, at least, he saw that like the first wave was, let's call it, quite primitive, right? Because those brute force attacks, some very obvious ways of checking if there is some password shown, like for example, maybe someone left a backup of WP config file, things like this.
Yeah.
But very quickly the brute force was enough. When he started, when he changed the password to something stronger, and when the brute force phase ended, yeah, they started scanning more deeply about to check what plugins they are, and so this would be another phase, vulnerabilities.
Awesome, awesome. Coming back to the security, coming back to the bug bounty. I mean, we do have a lot of questions regarding that. And my next question is like, what were the most common security flaws that you found out in this bug bounty hunt? And how can developers avoid making the same mistakes again? Because I understand that there must be a trend that you may have noticed when you were doing this bug bounty, when you were analyzing the reports. I mean, there must have been a trend where you can see, okay, so these are the security flaws that are present in most of these plugins. And I think people would love to know what those trends were so that they can avoid those in the future.
So I think that the biggest trend was cross-site scripting, always.
Yeah.
So if I remember, let me just check because I have this article right now with the stats. So cross-site scripting was 67% of the vulnerabilities we found during this bug bounty, and from what I remember from our white paper, it was also a number similar to this. So in a scale of year. So yeah, cross-site scripting is like the most popular way because it's quite the simplest. I mean, it's both the simplest to have, and it's quite simple to detect by researchers. We also see this. So it goes in both ways. And well, validation, sanitizing data, things like this. Kind of, let's be honest, the basics.
Yeah,
We have the
the basics.
functions already in WordPress for this, but very often we forget. We just forget to use it.
Yeah. And before I move on to the next question, we have a question from the audience. And Afkar asks that if you can just explain briefly what cross-site scripting is to our audience.
So it goes, in short, it goes about planting this vulnerable, let's say, link or payload somewhere on the website, and at some point this will be executed by someone with, for example, admin privileges. So this might just give access. For example, it can create another user, and we can plant things like this thanks to the fact that someone didn't sanitize the data somewhere, and we could insert this link that would launch a script. And
like a real life experience, example that would be that you would like imagine your website has a commenting form, and then I submit a comment in there, but my comment is actually HTML code that includes also JavaScript that is saving the session file from the browser, or sending it into a file or somewhere third party. So now I submit that comment, and because if the comment form doesn't sanitize the input of what the comment should look like in the real life, then it basically loads that script into the site. Now it tries to show that comment to the users, but while it tries to show that comment to the users, it's actually loading that script as part of the website and then doing whatever action we kind of like, or the hacker wanted to do. So that's kind of like maybe a simple example of that.
Yeah, the comments, the search engine. This is also like another very obvious vector that often kind of happens.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Of course, I hope this answers this question. This answers your question. I mean, if you still have any confusion, please feel free to comment, and Oliver and Maciek will definitely answer your question in the comments.
Sure.
So next question is around it's around behavior and attitude. I mean, we all know that when you tell a developer that this is something that is wrong with your product, I mean, they don't normally react in a very pleasant way. I mean, this is what we have observed in the past. I mean, when we talk to a developer who have worked very hard on a plugin, and we tell them that this is something that is wrong with your product, this is something that is wrong with your plugin, this is a security loophole that we found out. I mean, how do they react? I mean, how are they responding to that feedback? Like, are they cooperative, or have you faced resistance? Like, our plugin is fine, and we won't change anything, or are they normally very cooperative?
Classical.
Yeah,
It depends. It depends. we had all groups, from those very resistant.
maybe it's good to start with the good ones.
Yeah.
So Patchstack created, during WordCamp US end of last year, we launched what is called Managed Vulnerability Disclosure Platform. So it's essentially for plugin developers to have a single dashboard where all security reports will be kind of like streamlined into, and then Patchstack helps to validate them in the proper way and make sure that like vulnerabilities are getting like properly disclosed. So for example, we have over 600 plugins that have in the WordPress ecosystem, like over 600 plugins that have signed up to the Patchstack MVDP. And these include like some of the biggest and most popular plugins, like for example, Elementor. So if you find, or like if any security researcher finds a vulnerability in Elementor, then Elementor is actually like sending them to report that vulnerability to Patchstack. And then we make sure that this is getting properly fixed before disclosure. We reward the security researcher. And that also allows us to provide fastest protection to all Elementor users, because as Patchstack is providing virtual patching and vulnerability mitigation, this allows us to kind of like protect sites before anyone else as well. But then and these are like those plugin developers that are very proactive. And I mean, they also want to be compliant with the upcoming Cyber Resilience Act, which is actually making this mandatory. But then I would say there's like plugins where you try to report vulnerabilities to, and then you try to like send a report and they say like, hey, send it to our customer support ticket. And then you start sending it to customer support ticket, and it turns out that, oh, but we only have customer support tickets for premium customers who have, paid license. And then you cannot send them a security report.
Yeah.
And then some of them, like the biggest issue is that they're just missing that information. They don't have a system at all where to report vulnerabilities. And they just like kind of miss it and then we need to like escalate that to the WordPress.org. And WordPress.org is like, we work with the plugin review team. They then have the direct connections to the plugin owners, and then they reach out to them. But that very often goes into a direction where those plugins are just getting, temporarily closed or permanently closed, dependent of like whether they are abandoned or not. And if your plugin is getting closed for security reasons, obviously like the plugin developers are not super happy about it. But every time we get like this kind of like a negative, I would say, like kind of like outburst from a developer saying like, hey, what the hell? Like, why didn't you report it to us? Then we're like, we did. And that's one of the reasons why we are actually making screenshots of every single time when we are reporting vulnerabilities through like contact forums, and when there's like no other way to report vulnerabilities to. And like then they eventually come back to and say sorry, and like, oh yeah, they really need to like improve their processes. I think it's starting to get a little bit better. I think it's maybe also because Patchstack is very known in the ecosystem already, and they know that we're actually, we're out there doing good. But yeah, like it's definitely like some try to hide information about vulnerabilities because how they think that it might affect their reputation, but actually the worst thing that you can do in terms of your reputation is try to hide that information, because then it's going to come out, your users are not protected, and this is the kind of the kind of plugins that developers should avoid at all costs, to be honest.
Yeah. Although during this bug bounty in October, we had almost 74% reports we had to go through WordPress review teams because we did not get any answers, or there was just no contact point because, if I remember, the oldest plugins we found with the vulnerability back then was 17 years old. So that company probably don't exist anymore. Those emails were just
they still have active installations. Like there's still websites
and still
running with those plugins.
That's even worse.
Yeah.
So I would like to extend on this a bit as well. and asked that how long do you sort of chase after a developer or a plugin provider before you say that okay, it's not worth it anymore, because obviously it's time consuming, chasing after people, telling them that there's something that is wrong with your plugin and not getting a response. So how long do you normally chase after these people and try to communicate this issue with them until you decide okay, it's not worth it, we should focus on something else?
Do you
believe our
remember
default
or
is
the numbers? Yeah, because
I believe our default policy is 30 days. So we are either waiting. So the default is 30 days. If the plugin is getting updated to a fixed version, then we are obviously disclosing it as soon as it gets updated, because the users need to know that they need to update to that version. And honestly, this is information that there's no point of hiding away anyways, because hackers are actually monitoring the change logs. So they are seeing all the, even we have internal systems that are in real time, scanning every plugin update in the WordPress ecosystem. And we see immediately when there is a security update being released. So hackers do the same thing. So they could weaponize those vulnerabilities as quickly as possible. But when the plugin developer is not responding at all, or we have trouble, then we wait 30 days. And if after that they still don't respond to us, we just publish the vulnerability and let our users know that there is a security vulnerability that they need to eliminate, essentially, because most likely the developer isn't fixing it, and it could very easily be abandoned plugin.
Awesome. Yeah, I would again like to stroll into the comments before I move on to the next question. I think Rolf has a question where he asks that what guidelines do you recommend and use for your own sites in determining a safe or risky plugin? And do you have a scale that you classify, for example, A for a trustworthy plugin, B for it's okay but we use with caution, and C for don't use at all? Do you sort of grade these plugins in these categories when you use plugins for yourselves?
We don't necessarily score them based on that, but we do look into their history. It's a bit hard to have a standardized scoring system like that, because all of the plugins are very different. The code quality is different. We obviously we are, half of our team is basically threat intelligence and security researchers. So we have the capability of figuring out whether there's vulnerabilities in any of the stuff that we are using internally as well. And in fact, we are probably the biggest pen testing company for WordPress plugins out there. So many of the companies who are building WordPress plugins, they come to us and we actually do security auditing as a service as well. But most of the cases, what we look into is literally the source code, and we go just pure technical, is that code well written? Are there security vulnerabilities in there? And the second part is obviously how does the developer react to security issues? What is like Maciek said, what is their background of how they dealt with the security vulnerabilities in the past, how they are communicating this to the users, because some of them are just okay, we'll fix the vulnerability, but we don't let anyone know, because the correct way is that you need to actually let your users know that there was a security fix, and so forth. So there's a bunch of those things. And actually, if you look into our blog, we have a series where we kind of have analysis on different categories of plugins. I believe there's foreign plugins and things like that, which is kind of what the question is about, actually, where we've analyzed all the available kind of let's say foreign plugins, and we kind of look into those different categories and which ones are more safer option in that sense, where the developers are taking security seriously.
All right. Moving on to the next question. I mean, you obviously conduct this bug bounty, and you find out a lot of issues and vulnerabilities and threats. But do you think on top of that, it sort of exposes a bigger problem of having the need for a stricter plugin development standards for WordPress? I mean, you do this every month, right? And every month you find out new issues and new vulnerabilities. So don't you think that there has to be a need for a stricter plugin development standards like there are with other providers, with other platforms? I mean, other platforms that have their own marketplaces, and they vet the plugins themselves, and they make sure that the plugins that are listed on the marketplace are safe and with zero vulnerabilities. But with WordPress, that's not the case. So do you think that there has to be a better, check and balance for these plugins before they get listed on the repository?
I mean, in theory, to get into repository, your code is being reviewed. So this is the only review that your plugin gets, and this is kind of the problem because that's the only review. So I think that what we are lacking is having even some quite simple automated tests running on every update. It wouldn't solve everything. It would probably report quite a lot of false positives.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it would open eyes for some developers, and maybe they would say, okay, maybe I will take a look at this update again. Maybe I really made a mistake. And let's also remember that WordPress.org is mostly run by volunteers, or it's or we all know what is right now happening with some cuts. But so I want to, but what I want to say, right now it's probably impossible to think about making the WordPress security team bigger so it could work in a more proactive way. So we should probably start thinking about using some simple ways in which we could at least remove a part of the problem. Also, another problem is because, okay, that's great. We discovered during that 1 month, and we kind of closed even almost 1,000 plugins. That's great. But most of users won't even know about it because WordPress still misses the mechanisms about informing the users that, hey, this plugin is closed because of the security reasons. I mean, you can go into plugins, you have to click in one place, but that's not enough. I mean, if you can go into admin panel and see, hey, there is an update for this plugin, there should also be, hey, this plugin is closed. Think what to do with this. Maybe you should find an alternative, something like this. Because right now, I think the ecosystem is kind of failing with those quite simpler things and easier things that we could really change. Like, for example, those notifications, because this would make work of every WordPress security company much more meaningful, because users would know better what to do with those plugins. But yeah, like I said, those volunteers have limited time, so they can be more proactive, and that's also a big problem.
Now, Oliver, do you would like to add anything to this, or?
I mean, the good thing is that we're from Europe, and what we do the best is regulations, right? So ultimately, like, the plugin developers need to comply, because like we have the law was already passed. This is going to affect both WordPress core plugins. For example, you would need to start releasing updates, like functional updates, separately from the security updates and things like that. So this is all going to be like mandatory starting from 2026 already. So plugins that are currently lagging behind, they're not setting up those things up, they are just going to have a lot of trouble. Like, the Cyber Resilience Act has the same fine structure that GDPR has, and like nobody wants to get fined for not just like having security processes in place when they are shipping software that is being used by thousands of companies around the world. So the positive side of it is, like, regulations are pushing some of the people into it, even whether they like it or not. And this is the very short-term future already.
All right, awesome. I think we have another question in the comments. I sort of missed that earlier. We have, so Anto sort of asked this question, that how can we identify high-risk plugins before installing them? Like, is there a sign? Are there like any checkpoints that we should cover before, installing plugins on our websites?
I think we kind of covered it already.
History.
Yeah, the history, like Maciek said as well, like, look into the historic, like going to patchstack.com/database and look into search the plugin there, and then basically figure out like are there like any historical vulnerabilities present that have not been fixed? Important note here is that if a plugin does not have any vulnerabilities found, this can be also bad. That would just mean that, first of all, there's no information whether they actually have a proper security process in place, and this could just also mean that nobody has looked into it. So yeah, I would again look into signs that they have security processes in place, that they have vulnerability disclosure program, that they have like a clear way how to report vulnerabilities to them, and so forth.
Awesome. So next question is around like top 3 actions that people could take today if they want to improve their WordPress security. On the top of your head, what are those top 3 actions?
Like anything password and sessions related, and the second, I would literally have just top 2. Like one is basically setting up two-factor authentication and making sure that your own devices are secure. And the second one is to have virtual patching and vulnerability management. Like today, virtual patching is like the most essential security thing that you can have, because as I mentioned, we have almost 8,000 vulnerabilities found in a year. 33% of them are not patched at all. So if you even if you have auto updates enabled, you are not protected. So to have that kind of exposure covered, that you won't get hacked while you're waiting for the official developer to release a patch, or there's no patch coming at all, then you need something that is capable of basically holding back those vulnerabilities while you figure out what to do next. So I would say, yeah, everything two-factor authentication and personal cybersecurity hygiene. And the second part is really hard focus on the vulnerability management and virtual patching.
I see that you also took my proposals. And what can I now add? So, but okay, if there should be 3, I would add one more thing, because we have this thing in WordPress that we have this saying, there is a plugin for that, and we kind of got used to it. And everything in WordPress, everything should be simple, right? You want to have a faster website? Hey, there is a caching plugin. Do you want an accessible website? Hey, there is a plugin for this. You want a secure website? Hey, you should install a plugin. And that's kind of a problem, because we are very often changing processes that should always run in the background into plugins. And while those plugins very often should be the part of the process, because they should, because using a security plugin as a part of the whole security process, is a must, because we can't sit all the time in front of the computer just, I don't know, looking at patches I'm looking at the vulnerabilities or whatever. It's impossible. But we should also think about more things. So, for example, creating kind of your own framework of how to decide which plugin is safe, which not. Kind of evaluating all the plugins that you use from time to time and checking if it's still a good idea to use them. Also, being prepared if something goes wrong. Make sure do you have backups. Make sure if you are ready with kind of the formal parts. So, for example, informing your users that, hey, there is a chance that part of our data was compromised. Because the moment when you are in this situation, you have much less time to think. So you should prepare for things like those before. So kind of instead of looking for just one-click solutions, processes are processes. Sadly, they have to run in the background.
Maybe even add a little bit on top of it is also, so 3 days ago or 2 days ago, I had a talk here in Cloudfest, and where I was talking about WordPress security and layers. And I think it's also very important to say that you should cover security on all of the layers, but you should also do the right things at the right layers. So, for example, malware scanning, backups, you should never use plugins for that. You should basically use a server-side solution, because if you look into our white paper, you will see also that there is very widespread malware that is just the first thing that it injects the website, it basically looks whether the site has like, WordFence and other those kind of like security plugins installed, and then it will just whitelist itself in there. So then you get like a very false sense of security because, you think that you're secure because you have a security plugin that scans for malware, but then the malware is like injecting itself in there and basically deleting the security or like the malware scanner plugins from understanding that it is a malware. So you never should run malware scanner as a WordPress plugin, because you cannot like have that kind of like functionality be in the same place where the compromisation can happen. So it's a very like, if you think about it, it's like a big, like a logical flaw, right? Like you can't like kind of rely on malware scanner that is controlled by the same environment that is infected with malware. So, these kind of things that are also important, like, for example, virtual patching, you need to run it on the application. So this is something that you need to do inside of WordPress site as a plugin, because this is the only place where you have full visibility into the plugins, you have full visibility into the sessions, so you can like reduce the amount of false positives and make the virtual patches as effective as possible. And then if you want to protect the website from like, trash traffic, bots and things like that, like a very generic kind of like a traffic filtering, you should do that on the network layer, which is more like, Cloudflare and things like that. And you should have those all like layers covered and have solutions in there.
Awesome. Last question, guys, on this panel discussion, and that is, one golden rule that you can share for WordPress security in 2025. Like, what would that be? What would be your, first thing that you would like to share with people who wants to secure their websites this year?
I think with all the things, especially related with AI, with all the things we talk, trust less in everything. I mean, really. We already talk about how easy it is to generate code, and if this code will be a plugin, there will be a bigger chance that someone will install it without checking what's inside. So I think that for many years we already were trying to explain very often to a lot of people, hey, don't click in suspicious emails on links and stuff. So now I think it will be even more difficult because AI makes everything much real. And so that's why really I think that we should have much more trust issues with everything, and we should always check whatever we can.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, we already know based on the statistics, like if you look into the white paper that I shared a link to as well, like this was done in collaboration with Sucuri. Sucuri is another security company in the WordPress space that is owned by GoDaddy. And they gave us the statistics about like how many WordPress websites were hacked, and it was like 500,000 WordPress websites that were hacked last year. So we need to like really think and look into like what are the main ways how those websites are getting hacked, and then we have the statistics of like it's literally like half of them are because of vulnerabilities, and half of them is because of session hijacking and kind of like very poor usernames and passwords. The session hijacking and username passwords is actually the easiest to solve because you can just like you have full control over it at all times. But the vulnerabilities is something that is much harder to do because you need to basically do, there's so much more volume of information coming that you need to react on. So I would definitely recommend people to like turn like vulnerability management and kind of like vulnerability mitigation into a like essential, because this is going to be, the hardest part of that 50% of the reasons why your website would get hacked. So yeah, I mean, not only is it going to be now like vulnerability management and mitigation is actually also now mandatory if you want to have PCI DSS v4 compliance. So basically, for all e-commerce websites that are accepting credit card payments, vulnerability management is already mandatory. SOC 2, same thing. So I think I hope really that 2025 will kind of like show us that this is going to become like essential thing that is being deployed across all possible vectors. Yeah.
Maciek, your golden rule.
Yeah, like I said, trust less. That's it.
Yeah,
Just
trust less. All right. All right, perfect. Guys, this was it from this panel discussion. I think this was great. I think this was amazing. A lot of people in the comment section really appreciate your time and your knowledge and wisdom around security and vulnerability. I think this is a topic that needs to be discussed more. That needs to have more deeper conversations around plugins and plugin loopholes and vulnerabilities. But I think this session covered up a lot of things that people would want to hear, especially coming from you guys. So thank you so much, Maciek. Thank you, Oliver, for being here. It was a pleasure having you on this event. And on this note, I would also like to thank Patchstack, who are our partners for this event as well. So thank you guys. And I wish you best of luck